We need to show mercy where we can, because even though they deserve punishment, how do we show them mercy so that they would, I think mercy confounds people, and that's how you change them. I get my hope in small acts of mercy.
Welcome to Humanity 2.0 podcast. We have John Graham with us today. John, I am so excited to have you here and learn about your aspects of humanity, both in your life, but also what you've witnessed in the world. I love interviewing people of all ages and generations because there's so much in your path that we could all benefit from hearing. So I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here. And the truth is that I need some good news right about now. And talking with you is the highlight of my day.
Now, the story I want to tell you about the airline is I once interviewed a man about happiness, and he was so happy. And he said because he got to interact with people all day long, and he was an egg salesman from an egg farm. But before that, he was a flight attendant for a couple decades. And he was also a flight attendant during 9/11. And so he had witnessed so many different life events through the airlines. And his takeaway was that simple interaction between him and the customer or, the person flying, it meant the world. And so he took it upon himself to just smile and interact with them and make them feel seen and just give them this radiant, positive sunshine that just sent them on their way to their destination. So that tiny little act that he did, it must have really just changed the course of their day or their trip. But it was so big, that the outcome had to be so huge, yet such a little act. And he was just like one of the most fascinating people I'd ever met. And he had no idea about how impressive he was and how genuine, just a really stand-up human. And you come across those if you're lucky. You come across many of them if you're extremely lucky. But it's so comforting to know that those people exist, and then to understand that little tiny drop of kindness is probably, I guess, amplified in whomever he connected with.
Absolutely. And even when you're on the plane, I like to sit on the aisle seat so that I can be accessible. For example, if the person in front of me is trying to lift a bag up, lifting that bag for them is a little thing, but it makes me feel like I've done something to keep the demons at bay in our culture.
One of the very first questions that I love to ask our guest is, in your life experience, not considering the definition of humanity, but how would you define humanity based on your life experience?
One of the reasons I spend my time in Texas is because it's predominantly Hispanic. It reminds me that I'm a minority as an Anglo. That gives me, because particularly right now, we tend to see the world in terms of whiteness in our culture. We are a small part, particularly the world culture. I work very hard at understanding Mark Twain's definition that travel, being with other people, being with different people, is the only cure for prejudice and narrow-mindedness. And that's one of the reasons I like to listen to somebody else's story. I'll give you a good example. I'm writing the sequel to my novel, and the first novel was about a young white man growing up. This one is one of the characters, and it's a black man that Daniel met. And I'm writing his story from his viewpoint, so I have to understand what it's like growing up as a black boy. But what I'm learning through my research is that white boy, black boy, they have the same feelings, same attitudes. They're the same. Mm-hmm. And it's the same story. They just happen to have a different perspective because of the cultural experiences. And right now, there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of tribalism, we call it. And I'm hoping that maybe you and I can be a light in the darkness, and we can break down those tribal barriers with our small acts of kindness and inclusion.
Well, I'm so curious, how do you do your research? Is it just books, or do you interview people? How do you immerse yourself in that experience?
Well, I'm writing fiction. My first novel was pure fiction, but it was based on, obviously, my experiences. But also in my work with men and women coming from prison, I'm able to understand about a lot of the mistakes that people make that have cataclysmic consequences in their lives. And so the thing with a fiction novel is you take research to develop the background. For example, I had to learn about Cleveland in 1955 to understand what Charles felt like growing up. So my research there was factual, but the story itself is fiction. And that's the universality of it, is that growing up in Cleveland, for him, is no different than Daniel growing up in Pittsburgh in 1955 in a Eastern European community where racism was rampant. The research is by and large in the people, it's from my experiences. And that's the thing I love about writing fiction, is that you're free to create. You just let let your imagination run. And my characters actually take me where I'm going. Sometimes I'm surprised when I get there.
What is his name? The one that you're currently writing?
The first novel was called Running as Fast as I Can, and there was an event in there where an important character died, and so the sequel is called Requiem, and it follows up with these characters because that death in the first story changes the lives of everybody, and a Requiem is a remembrance, a memorial mass for the dead. So. And the idea is that when people die, they don't really die in that they're forgotten and gone. It's just that they change us in different ways. One line in the book was, the dead, they don't really leave us. They're always watching over us. And that's an element of our faith.
I feel like they also live in us. Their memories and their stories and their impact on our lives live in us, and so they're never gone because they're constantly within us. They make that imprint. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
In fact, my goal is that maybe one of the men we've helped will show up at my funeral, and maybe he'll say, "I made a difference in his life." And to me, that's the greatest epitaph I can get. And I may not make the headlines, and I'm sure I won't make politics, and I won't be famous, but maybe I'll have helped one person.
Well, imagine all the small acts, to go back to what you said earlier, of helping people in an airport or anywhere, opening a door, all those interactions. You made a difference in small ways, but who knows what kind of impact they had on those people and their life journey. So yeah, I would think that if we live that kind of life where we seek out those moments where we could help people in small ways, then there is a lot of fulfillment there. So, you've definitely accrued all kinds of merit, I guess, or karmic points.
For maybe background would help here. When I was 53, I had gone through a series of careers. I call them detours, and we were near homeless. I had tried my hand at being a minister at one point even, and I wasn't that good at it. And so we were struggling to know, because we wanted to make a difference, but we didn't know how, my wife and I. And so we bought an old house, fixed it up, and used it as a shelter. And out of that, we started taking in, the Department of Correction asked us if we would house men coming from prisons. And so we partnered with the Department of Correction, and over the last 24 years, we have housed in one way or another and helped 2,500 men and women coming from prison restart their lives. So that to me is a significant marker that instead of wallowing in my failures, I tried to turn around and help others who were they had failed in some ways too. And that to me is a great lesson of what to do with our failures. We turn them around by helping somebody else.
Can you walk us through what that experience was like for you when you first received someone, and how you determined best to help them? What goes on, and what are the highs? What are the lows? Like this, what kind of summary could you give?
We started off with nothing more than a vision, and we had this 140-year-old house that we were still working on. And the chaplain at the prison asked me if I would take this man in who was coming from across state from Cleveland. And for background, he was a black man coming to a predominantly rural white community. I didn't have any problem with that. I'd met the man, I knew him, and I thought it's not a big deal because I thought the community was a normal small Ohio farm town. But when word got out that we had a felon coming into our house, the neighbors started passing petitions and they started calling city council, writing letters to the editor. Their ordinances were passed, and it became actually quite intense. I had police protection going into some meetings, and we ended up over the next several years, because we expanded from one fellow to other fellows, but we had to sue the city 3 different times because the fear of the unknown. And nobody ever said that it was a racial issue, but in these rural white communities, race is always a factor.
Oh, sure.
But here's the irony. His name was Reggie. He was as afraid in the white community as the white community was of him. But the best part is that he stayed, never got in trouble again, got married, got a job, and he called me recently. And out of the blue, he said, "I just read your book." And he just wanted to tell you, "I want to tell you I'm doing well." That was, to me, the first story was a success story that stuck. And that, I'm glad we didn't give in to the pressure.
Did you witness any kind of transformation in the community when all of this is happening? So I understand, like, you get to that boiling point where everyone is up in arms and they're wanting this away from them. But were there any moments where some people came around and embraced Reggie?
Actually, there were many who took, particularly within the church community, because you'll get people more motivated because of their faith. But a lot had to do with Reggie's personality. After his initial nervousness, he wasn't afraid to mix in, and he determined. So a lot of the credit goes to him. But what we did was I determined to not respond with the same vindictiveness. Today in politics, you see name calling, and it doesn't do anybody any good when you use pejorative terms on Facebook. And so what I tried to do was I would bring data to these meetings and say, "Here, look at the data on recidivism," and nobody listened to the data. So what I was doing at the time was writing a newspaper column, a humor column, and I would tell just fun anecdotes, like I called the Girl Scout sales girl the devil because she was always tempting me, and I had a lot of fun. And we presented ourselves as non-threatening. And but the most important thing we did was in the winter was we made sure that not only did we clean our sidewalks, but we cleaned everybody's sidewalk on the entire block. So, and we never said a word about it, but we kept our house clean and quiet. And what we were saying, without saying it, was that we are safe. We're not a threat. And in time, the same people who waved at us with one finger now used all their fingers to say hello. But I do think the biggest thing that changed it was the Department of Correction, because we had a contract and they would pay us a per diem for our housing. And that way somebody could live there for free who was on parole. But we were able to take people from the local court. Instead of going to jail, they came to our house for free. And we calculated that over the years, we saved the local county court $1 million in jail costs.
Wow.
That spoke to the Republicans and the Democrats.
Sure. And you gave those people a loving home, a place where they could feel safe and grow. I mean, it's necessary to have that nurturing in order to transform into, I guess, you gave them space.
And I will say that there's not the threats, there's not the editorials. And I'm sure there are some people who grumble. They have a knee-jerk reaction. But we have 5 houses in this little town. And now in Dayton, which is nearby, a larger city, we have another 12 houses. So and I will say that in the larger cities, there's a more welcome because they realize that they can't pretend the problem's not there. And so we're actually, most of our work is in Dayton, which is 130,000 people.
Well, that's remarkable work that you've done.
It's grown, and I think the reason it's grown is we've simply said, what is the need? and how can we adapt to meet that need? So, we've gone from a $5,000 budget to what is now a $2 million budget. And it has nothing to do with my skills. I think what it comes down to is we've simply said, here I am. What do you need? How can I help?
Do you feel the world would be far different of a place if we all took time and asked ourselves, what does the world need, or what does humanity need, and how can I help it?
I feel there are days I feel like Rip Van Winkle, where I've gone to sleep under King George, and I've awakened in a whole new country under George Washington. I've awakened everything I read every day, the anger, the hostility, the tribalism from people who are educated, moral people, taunts on Facebook, and the name calling and the bumper sticker mentality. It reminds me a great deal of what John Lewis went through in the early days of the civil rights movement. And I try to use his example of how can I respond to all this? How can I be an example with simple acts of kindness, like calling somebody brother? And that's what he did in Congress for 30 years, regardless of your attitude or actions. And I remember that, and I try to live that. And particularly today, when I may see a comment on Facebook, and I would try to respond with a thoughtful but yet non-threatening response. I try to encourage dialogue. And Facebook has become a place where it can be very dark. So how do we light a little candle? And I have found that even these podcasts, it's a chance to talk about what is possible. It's the good news of changed lives. And I've found there's a very welcome audience for second chances that we preach. And has nothing to do with prison necessarily. I think a lot of people feel they need a second chance.
It comes in the form of reinventing yourself.
Absolutely.
When you need to pivot, we do it all the time. We just call it different words.
Absolutely. Now, I'll be candid with you, Vanessa. What really changed everything for us was the advent of meth and particularly heroin, because what happened was it went from being a city drug to being an everywhere drug. Mm-hmm. And we found that when it's your son, your grandson, your brother, your sister, when it's in your family, you tend to realize that those people are us people. And that allowed people to reconsider their attitude towards others.
I feel like being able to have these conversations in this show and to take a moment to stop our lives and talk about humanity, what we could do, what we've done, where we're headed. I think that's an excellent time to reflect on what's possible. And so I think by putting this out there and having people be able to listen to these conversations, it promotes, that space for people to talk about it. And then we also have a video series where I edit moments of just amazing humanity that really needs to be seen. And by putting it out there in the world for others to see, they can receive positive content that'll, kind of make them stop and think about, oh, hey, this is possible, or there are still humans like this. And I think that, what we ingest in the media, it has a huge impact on how we, move forward in our daily lives, but also how we proceed forward and just in general. So I'm all about creating a positive environment where people can see the goodness, but also reflect on where we're headed.
I had a series of discussions with 3 different people on Facebook recently. One was one who agreed with my thinking, and the other was one who was rabidly opposed to it, and he was what I called the bumper sticker mentality. And then one who was willing to discuss, but definitely disagreed with me. And I focused in on her conversation because she went from saying, you're wrong, to we both said, I understand your position. Let's discuss this. And it was actually a reasoned response that we could see the other person's side. And I think there's hope in these discussions if we're willing to actually not repost something that is clearly inflammatory, but to ask questions and encourage people to defend their position, or not defend negatively, but to support their position. And number one, it stretches me, and I think it stretched her. And we both thanked one another at the end of the conversation.
Yeah. The fact that you were open to listening to someone else's opinion that's completely opposite of yours, that's a game changer, because you didn't just turn yourself off based on the fact that she had a completely opposite opinion, but you were open to receiving that information. So that in itself is a big deal.
Yeah, it stretched me, because it's very easy from my position to be dismissive in a different way. I may not use the same name calling, but sometimes academics can use a different form of name calling, and we're just as guilty.
So where do you see humanity going from here? Do you feel there's a, I guess, more possibilities, or is it kind of?
I feel, using a religious reference, I feel much like the apostles, and they're surrounded by the Romans, and all they're seeing is the circus where they're about to be fed to the lions. I feel like we're in a very, David Brooks would call it a tribal time, where we're seeing, I haven't seen this much animosity since amidst all the anti-war protests. I was involved in some to a degree, but mostly what we were involved with was this great, overwhelming disrespect for the government. But at least we felt there was a constitutional order, particularly in Congress. We felt at least Congress would be able to stand up against the executive, and they did. But today, I'm not convinced that that's there. And you caught me at the end of the day, so I tend to be a little more downer. But I'm not convinced that we're willing to make the hard decisions that are necessary to maintain our democracy. I'm very concerned. Worldwide, there's this move towards authoritarianism. And it goes through cycles throughout history. You had 1870, you had 1920, you had 1950. And we're seeing it again, where people are embracing the strong man. And the strong man, he may support what you want today, but tomorrow he may not, and likely will not. I think all we can do is light a little candle like you and I are doing today. Mm-hmm. And I write a column for Substack, and I try to present something positive and something questioning and get people thinking. Because if, like Martin Niemöller said, when they came for the Unionists, I didn't speak up because I'm not a Unionist. When they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up because I'm not a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one to defend me. So I want to make sure that I speak up in my small, small way. And this podcast is one way to just cry out into the darkness that we need to be kind to one another.
When you were protesting, what turned in you that said, I need to get out there amongst people and protest? Like, what changed for you where you got out there?
It's hard to explain. You're half my age, but the draft was a very, very important element growing up, because you would end up in the jungles of Vietnam. It was not a question. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that I was going to enroll in the Air Force as an officer, 1970, and then Kent State happened. And I was at Ohio State during those shootings, and I was involved peripherally in a protest. And the guards surrounded us. They had their guns on us. The students were antagonizing. We knew that other students had been killed that afternoon. Mm-hmm. And it was incredibly frightening and demoralizing and overwhelming emotional experience. And I immediately, when I got back to campus, I rescinded my application for the Air Force, and I applied for a conscientious objector status. The draft board threatened me with prison. And so we ended up compromising, where I did 2 years of alternative service in an orphanage in Detroit. So I felt that I fulfilled my obligation as a citizen, but I maintained my conscience in what I felt to be my legitimate protest against the war. And the truth is that I have not seen improvement. Let's put it that way. Vietnam or Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, it just seems like we're making decisions for young men to fight an old man's war of politics. And I do believe at root it's a spiritual issue where we seem to have lost our understanding of our purpose as humanity, to be connected with the Creator and to serve one another as part of the creation.
So having seen just terrible things and living through difficult times in history and being there, how did you not become completely jaded or completely depressed over, I guess, maintain your humanity amongst all of that chaos?
Well, I was raised in the conservative church, and I've found that the conservative church tends to have more answers than it does questions. So I've learned to ask more questions, and I've found that the Creator is far more inclusive than we realized originally. And I think that what I did was, by reaching out to help people who are totally different than me, the highlight of my day is to work with somebody who's come from prison, who's come from an abusive home, who may have been raised on the streets or maybe in foster care. And his concept of survival is much, much more basic than mine. But just by listening to them and maybe helping him get a job and stay out of jail, that's where I get my hope, man at a time or one woman at a time. And sometimes it's simply by being kind. And we have so much authority in our program where I could terminate somebody. I could move them out of our house for breaking a rule, and they're on the street. But what I tell my staff is we need to show mercy where we can, because even though they deserve punishment, how do we show them mercy so that they would, I think mercy confounds people, and that's how you change them. And that's where I get my hope, in small acts of mercy.
Can you expand more on that?
Well, we had a fellow who we have in our rules structure, for safety's sake, you have a curfew, and we have no smoking in the building. And what we put a great deal of emphasis on is to make your bed. It sounds simple, but making your bed is a respect act for yourself and for your roommate. And what got you to prison is taking care of me, the I pronoun. What will keep you out of prison is the we pronoun, thinking of your roommate. So we have some people who we're constantly trying to remind them to make their bed, or they may be caught smoking, or they'll break curfew. And we had one fella who had 22 violations before eventually we had to let him go because he simply refused to comply. But we did that. What we did was we worked with the parole officer so he wasn't put on the street. We said to the parole officer, he's not ready. He's not emotionally or mentally stable enough to be in independent housing. And we're going to let him stay till the end of the month so you can find a place for him. And he did. That to me is a practical act of mercy. And that's not untypical. In fact, my staff jokes about it because they always say, well, we know what John's going to do. And so, but that's my goal, is to transfer that understanding of being merciful. That doesn't mean being acquiescent. That simply means I want to help you if you're willing to let me help you. I'll give you the second or third chance, but I won't let you walk over and create a safety problem for the house.
If you could share a message with humanity, what would you tell them?
I would say all of us are on the Titanic. There's not enough lifeboats. So how can we share space? Because the Titanic had many, many boats that had few or one or two people. They were half full boats because people were desperate to take care of themselves. And I would say we're all on the Titanic right now. So how can we help one another with small acts of kindness? I don't expect you to open your home to a stranger like I did. I wouldn't encourage it. But I would ask you to let somebody go in front of you at the line at the post office, or when somebody is too slow at the red light, and this is my pet peeve, my first instinct is to hit the horn. But I just have to swallow. Or the people in front of me at the McDonald's drive-thru are too slow, and I want to hit the horn again. Somebody bought my soda in front of me. And when I went up to pay for it, I had no bill. And I said to myself, I'm glad I didn't beep my horn at that guy. His little act of kindness cost him $2, but I'm still talking about it today.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, that's a little thing
That's
we can
beautiful. Yeah.
I don't know who he
has
is.
so many ripples. Yeah. I love it. I love when I witness just random acts of kindness. That's the best. It stays with you.
That's right. He had a $2 investment, and I'm sure he felt better. And I felt preemptively guilty because I thought I was real tempted to beep the horn, and I'm very glad. And there's a lesson in that for me.
And all of us. Yeah. I think that's excellent advice, and you're an amazing human. Just going to put that out there. I think that you have probably changed or impacted more lives than you'll ever know. I think we all do, especially if we dedicate ourselves to doing these small acts of kindness or just, just smiling and interacting with someone on a very simple level. It really has a huge impact. So I think that we just really need to do more of that. What else are you working on? You said you're working on your book. Where can people learn more about you and your works and anything else that you're just wanting to share with the world?
What I would encourage people to do is the novel I've written took me 10 years and it was rejected repeatedly. And I kept re-editing and sending it out. And eventually when it was published, it's garnered 30 awards. And what the readers have written back is that they couldn't stop reading. They couldn't stop turning the page. And that to me means that they felt Daniel's story. It's called Running as Fast as I Can, because I think so many of us feel like we're running, but we can't catch up with what I call normal people. So I would encourage people to go to johndavidgraham.com. That's my website. Link on the book, and it's on Amazon. You can download 3 or 4 chapters for free. Mm-hmm. Check it out. But see if you can feel Daniel's story. And I believe once you start reading, you better block off about 12 hours because you're going to be sitting there reading. And I'm working on the sequel now because the interest is so great. But the truth is that maybe if I can make a difference in the community with my writing, maybe I can offset the demons in Washington right now, the name calling, with my act of kindness.
As an author, I have to ask just a random question. When you write, do you write what's in your heart or do you write what you know?
Well, I do an outline, what's my storyline want to be. But clearly, my editor taught me this. The last 2 years, he taught me to put emotions into my character because I have a doctorate in research. And what it taught me was to present facts. And facts don't make people understand or feel a character. So I had a factual story, and my editor said, I don't like Daniel. I just don't like him. So I spent 2 years rewriting Daniel's emotions, getting them out to the point where people literally will cry when reading the ending of the book. And they identified with Daniel because they said he was so human. So I would say, absolutely, let your emotions out. Let them come out, because my wife's listening to this now. And she always says she learned more about me in my book than she ever did from talking to me, because I'm not an emotional person. Yeah, she's over there waving at me now.
Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to chat with us and share your experience. I truly love when I meet people that are older than me, because there's so much life experience that we have no idea exists in you. And so being able to just hear about it, it's so important.
Let me say this, Vanessa, that I was 53 when I finally found my niche. And I want to encourage people who feel like they don't know what they're going to do. They feel like they're going through the motions. As long as you're willing to try something, this was a crazy idea, but it transformed my life. It transformed my 10 staff. It transformed 2,500 residents. And I think it was the basis for the book. And we've sold 12,000 copies just in the past several months. So I think there is definitely a market, not for my ideas, but for mercy. And if you're looking for a place to express yourself, find a way to share your humanity.
I think that's a great plan. I look forward to reading your book and your sequel. When is that going to come out, do you think?
Well, it was hard to start writing again because writing is a lot of work. But once I started last week, 2 weeks ago, I started. And once you start flowing, I know it's going to take me a year because I simply don't have the 10 years it took me to write the first one. So if I can get it done in a year, my publishing format is already out there. So check out the Amazon site, take a look at it, and keep your eye open for Requiem. And I guarantee you it's a page turner. Both are page turners.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm going to go check out that first one today. For everyone else, we will see you guys on the next episode of Humanity 2.0 podcast. Seriously, an absolute pleasure to spend this afternoon with you, John. Wishing you the best. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And maybe we'll see each other in San Antonio one day. Who knows?
Well, we'll probably be driving 80 miles an hour on 410.
Right. Well, for me, it's like 35 back and forth, but yeah.
5's a parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. So well, you never know. The two ships may meet one day, but until then, keep doing what you're doing. Your work is just so inspiring, and you and your wife are amazing humans. So thank you so much.
I give a lot of credit to my wife. Trust me.
Yeah,
and she's not even here to hear that.
Oh well, she'll hear it when the episode publishes. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Vanessa.